Hello, everybody. Welcome back once again. As always, this is Jay checking in with the Energon Universe. It's a little different this time. It is free comic book day, the most wonderful time of year. And of course, the wonderful little Energon Universe family has its own special issue. So because of the nature of this, it's going to be a little different, because it's a collection of the three stories from the three series. I'm not going to do as fine detailed reviews as I typically do, largely just because there's not a whole lot really to talk about each story, and I mean, let's be honest, I got this for free, so I'm not really exactly getting much more than what I paid for. So anyways, going on to the first story, and the longest of the three is, of course, Transformers, as always written by Daniel Warren Johnson, and this time we have guest art from Ryan Ottley, yes, the Invincible guy. And I do have something I want to say about his art, so I'll get to that. So the story is largely a flashback to what happened on board the Ark before, or, well, during, I guess, it was crashing. Predominantly explaining what happened to Megatron. And it's our first real actual look at Megatron in this universe. And, well, they establish him pretty early on, pretty well, because he immediately fucking kills Brawn on page 1 of the book by shooting him straight through the chest. So that's, what is that? 2 times he's killed Brawn now? It's, poor track record for that guy. Poor Brawn fans, all fucking 4 of you, I guess. But I mean, hey, Brawn's probably going to come back later because he didn't get shot in his secret weak point of his shoulder, so he'll probably be fine. Anyways, it's largely setting up the conflict between Megatron and Optimus, personality-wise, and explaining how Megatron lost his arm and got lost on Earth. And I actually really do like how they set up Megatron's personality in this. He's very much kind of that honorable warrior king type, where he comes off as very much a might makes right type here, and he seems like he's mostly sympathetic to the ideals of the Autobots, but is largely critical of them because they were weak and spineless cowards, and they wanted peace and the usual big unga bunga warrior type stuff. But he's good. He's really good at Megatron. It seems like they're doing a little bit of the IDW stuff where the Autobots were kind of soft and corrupt, and that brought down Cybertron. That seems to be what they're going to be doing. I imagine they're going to tie in some of the G1 cartoon stuff with the Quintessons later, but that seems to be what the angle they're setting up with for now. So it's good. I really like it. We get the fight between Optimus and Megatron on the Ark, and we see how he loses his arm, which is Optimus just fucking cleaves it right off. And, of course, he crash lands on Earth because Starscream backstabs him and shoots him off the Ark as it's plummeting through orbit. Which is a good shot. It's a really good sequence, the whole flashback. I like it. We get this nice big splash screen with Optimus and Megatron leaping into battle. It's really good. Otley's art is pretty good here. He's kind of copying a lot of the aesthetic choices that Johnson used himself when he did his art. And it looks fairly good. He's got some weird, like the way he draws the characters' mouths are a little weird, and some of he's definitely cleaner than Johnson's art, but he's trying to replicate a lot of the heavier aesthetic detailing to the metal and the armoring of everything, and the way the action flows. It's a little noticeable. It's definitely a departure from his usual style. I actually didn't realize it was him until I was looking at the credits before I started recording. But no, it's really good art. And so the flashbacks ends with him falling out of orbit, and we then cut to him down in Cobra Law, waking up screaming in anger. And the remainder of the story from there is him fighting his way out of Cobra Law, including a battle with Globulus, which is really nice. Again, we get some nice character moments with Megatron where he actually spares and completely, legitimately spares one of the scientists there when he gives them what he wanted. He doesn't backstab them. He actually, says thank you, and he's actually being, fair and honest, which is weird to say fair and honest and Megatron in the same sentence. It usually doesn't happen. So it's good. We get some really good action. The fight with him and Globulus is really good. He's got this weird, fucking 12-armed snake centipede thing. The whole fight's a little not that interesting, honestly, between them. Megatron actually almost loses the fight, too, which is surprising, but he gets a nice little rage boost, and he's able to, and the issue ends with him back up on the top side, vowing revenge against, of course, Starscream. So, I really like that as the setup for Megatron returning. This story actually did get leaked a little while ago, and I kind of alluded to that in the review for the last issue of Duke, where, almost entirely the leak was accurate. The leak said that he was going to kill Globulus and destroy Cobra-La, which didn't happen, but otherwise everything matches what it said, so... I actually did like that they don't do that. I like that setup there of, him beating the Cobra-La guys and escaping on his own, but still leaving them around. It's gonna be very interesting. I like that idea of keeping them around. I know... Cobra-La is a very divisive topic in G.I. Joe, but I think they'll work better having the Transformers around, because they're more of that harder, kind of wackier sci-fi that G.I. Joe never really quite goes to a lot, at least in the comics and stuff, from what I'm familiar with. So I think they'll work out better here having the Transformers and all the other alien stuff involved. But no, it was a really good short story. I really liked it. I really liked the take on Megatron, where he's not just, like, obviously blatantly cartoonishly evil, but he's still very much a bad guy. I like that. I think it's a very interesting... I've always kind of liked that interpretation of Megatron, where he's somewhat well-intentioned, but is just so far lost in his own manic sauce that he's just completely gone off the deep end in terms of his insanity. But I like that they don't go too far with him here, where they set him up as being fair but violent, more or less, where, again, he shows mercy to a non-combatant, and he seems to be largely sympathetic to the ideals of the Autobots, but just disagrees fundamentally, and that's where the war came from. I hope they don't go too far with it like IDW did, where they end up making the Autobots and the stuff on Cybertron get so much more worse and convoluted that Megatron ends up looping around and becoming a good guy. I especially hope they don't have him redeem himself and become a good guy. Megatron needs to stay a bad guy. Once as an experiment was fine in the comic, especially in IDW, but they should not have kept it going as long as they did. It does not work. It just can't work long term. I'm sorry, guys. It was fun for a little bit. Don't get me wrong. I liked good guy Megatron as a concept, but they just can't keep doing it. I'm sick of it at this point. Earthspark did it. Didn't work there. IDW kept it going too long. Stopped working after a while. He needs to stay a bad guy. He needs to stay an antagonist, a clear antagonist in this. And I like that they're kind of setting up to be... Again, it seems like they're setting up to be very solidly, understandable as a villain, but and have good motives, but they need to keep him a bad guy. So I think so far they have a good setup here, and I just hope they stick with it. I hope they don't try to tweak with it too much. It works. What they have works. It's a really good take on Megatron. I like it. So far overall, this was pretty good. Honestly, I think you could have probably spliced this into a full issue, kind of like in between as a B-plot, more or less in like a full issue rather than making this a free comic day story. But I think it works here. It's fine. We haven't really gotten any teases of what's going forward in the main book from Solicits, so I imagine Megatron's probably going to be coming back near the end of the next arc, so probably around issue 11 or 12 or so. Which I think is good. That gives them enough time to kind of build up the story more for him to make a proper debut. It's going to be really interesting, too, because especially him vowing specific vengeance against Starscream more than anybody else. Him being very laser-guided on beating the fuck out of Starscream, as is usually the thing that Megatron does after a long absence. I remember IDW made a joke about that in one story after Megatron got revived into his cool stealth bomber design, where he was just like, the first thing I'm going to do is beat the shit out of Starscream. So I like that they're going to keep going with that angle of the first thing Megatron needs to do is beat the shit out of Starscream, and I imagine he's probably going to be disappointed because Starscream is currently dead. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, he did kind of get his heart ripped out and thrown into a volcano, and I mean, I know Starscream kind of walks away from death, all the time, but I don't know. I mean, he's currently not around, so it's gonna be interesting how he takes that. Unless Starscream comes back in the next, like, 3 issues, which is believable. But overall, no, definitely the strongest of the 3, and I really like this a lot. I hope this keeps in circulation in, like, later collections and stuff. I hope this, because this is a good, nice little short story. So the next one up is our Void Rivals story, keeping the same crew from the main book, Robert Kirkman and Lorenzo De Felici. This one it's okay. I would definitely say it's the weakest of the 3, but it's not super long. So we open up with ya boy Skuxoid talking to his client that he mentioned in a previous issue of Void Rivals, Slizardo, where they were debating over the certain issues Skuxoid had with fulfilling his contract, which for most of you who aren't reading Void Rivals, quick catch up there. In issue 2 or 3, I actually forget which one. I think it was issue 3. The 2 main characters in that ran into Skuxoid on his ship, and then ended up trading their old ship cobbled together from just random junk shit for a better ship, and that's what he was planning on selling to this guy. But then in the next issue, that ship ended up getting stolen by the Quintessons because they found out that it's being made from the Zertonian tech, which is the aliens from Void Rivals. So they found out about them, and that's why the ship got stolen. And that's where this whole debate here is coming from, is that he's pissed off now that he doesn't know this alloy is here, and it's not really important. It's kind of boring. Really, the only important thing is that we find out his buddy Slizardo is not working alone, and that this whole ploy for the alloy, and finding out that it's Zertonian tech, was because Slizardo was working with somebody else who wanted it, who turns out to be none other than our old pal Hot Rod. And yes, Hot Rod. He's not Rodimus here yet. I'm assuming probably not for a while, but anyways, Hot Rod reveals that the whole scheme was that he's trying to track down a friend who went missing looking after an old Cybertronian legend. His friend, who is most definitely just going to end up being Springer, considering we already know he's in issue 9 of Void Rivals, believed that whatever this secret legend was could possibly save Cybertron, and Hot Rod is on the search for it. After some gentle persuasion, Skuxoid fills in Hot Rod with all the details of what's been going on, and the 3 part ways all off on their own journeys, with a mysterious figure watching in the distance. So yeah, this one, it's kind of boring. I mean, it's really only like 3 pages long anyways, not counting the splash page of Skuxoid at the start. Not really a whole lot happens. It's pretty much just talking and explaining shit that's already happened in that book, so there really isn't a whole lot to talk about, unfortunately. I do like the interpretation of Hot Rod. He's very much taking, again, from IDW with that kind of smug, overly sarcastic dickhead Hot Rod, or Rodimus, or whatever the fuck you want. He's Hot Rod. He's still Hot Rod. He's not Rodimus yet. I need to keep fucking calling him Hot Rod. I get too used to calling him Rodimus. Anyways, Hot Rod is very much taking a little bit from that sort of later interpretation of Hot Rod, a little bit from the comics, earlier comics, the Furman stuff. But I like him here. You can definitely tell Kirkman is a fan of Hot Rod because he saved him for the story he's writing instead of showing up literally anywhere else, which can't exactly blame him, to be fair. But yeah, this really doesn't have a whole lot else to say about it. It's just basically a lot of talking and, recapping shit we already know. It's okay. It's really not a bad story, so it's not like it's a waste of time or anything. It's whatever. The art is still whatever. De Felici's definitely gotten better at drawing the Transformers characters compared to the first few issues, which is good, especially if Springer's being brought into the main story. But beyond that, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about the art. It's fine. The color palettes are really bland and flat here, which is admittedly kind of a personal choice. But compared to the rest of Void Rivals, it's definitely very noticeably boring, the art. It's very kind of bland and drab, which is unfortunate because the art really has been one of the stronger points of Void Rivals. So yeah, that's about it for that one. Moving on to the third and final story, which is specifically just labeled as G.I. Joe, which, I mean, makes sense, really, but besides the point. Anyways, this is more specifically a Duke book, again, written by Joshua Williamson and Jason Howard doing the art. So this actually picks up from the ending of Duke, which, if you didn't watch the previous episode, basically, G.I. Joe is now a thing, and it's in its early stages of being set up. Hawk has given Duke carte blanche to building G.I. Joe, which Duke has immediately exercised to make a very bad decision by trying to recruit the Baroness. And speaking of the Baroness, we find her somewhere, not specified where, out and about on her own, as she is attacked by a group of, I don't really know what the fuck to call. I'm just calling them cyber ninjas, because that's kind of what they are. They're like black and neon green ninja dudes with capes and shit. I don't fucking know. I don't know. Whatever. She's being attacked by some fucking ninjas, I guess, in the middle of the fucking city somewhere. And that's really what the most of the issue is her fighting ninjas until Duke shows up to save her from said ninjas. And despite the terrible idea that it was, Duke explains his motivations for trying to recruit the Baroness as he saves her, explaining that he needs somebody who is anti-authority and he is going to be against the American Kool-Aid of the government and all that. Basically somebody who's going to question everything that's going on and be a voice of reason and conflict that will help keep everybody from getting blind to the truth. And that's his motivation for wanting to keep her on the team, because otherwise it's that or jail. And the main story ends with Baroness suiting up and deciding to become a member of G.I. Joe. However, our story's not over yet, as we cut back to Hawk, looking over a spread of intel over various figures, mostly cameos of other G.I. Joe characters. We get a scene of Destro, and it looks like the mass device in a smaller panel. We get Tomax and Zaymot, the two twin dudes, and a quick panel of the Dreadnoks compound burning, which is what happened in Cobra Commander's book, showing that he's pretty much caught up on everything that's going on. But we find out that everything was basically going according to Hawk's Keikaku, and that the two cyber ninjas were actually Flint and Lady J. And that although Hawk's plan was to recruit the Baroness, it wasn't for G.I. Joe, and that he's building a second secret team in the shadows. So that one's okay. That works as a nice little end and wrap up to everything that's going on in the Duke book, and a nice little setup for going forward with G.I. Joe. It's not really a whole lot in terms of the action. The actual fight between Baroness and the ninja guys, I guess, quote-unquote now, is really not all that interesting. The art is a significant downgrade compared to the actual Duke book, which is a shame. It's not very good in comparison. But it's fine. It's a nice little conclusion to the storyline with the Baroness, because she just kind of disappears in between pages in issue 4, and we never get a resolution to where she is in issue 5. So it's a nice little resolution of that plot line, rather than dragging that out over another couple of issues or another miniseries or whatever. Having the Baroness join G.I. Joe is an interesting decision. I don't know if that's necessarily going to pay off personally, but it's certainly a new angle to go with. I'll give him that. Beyond that, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about this one. The idea of a second secret G.I. Joe team is a interesting idea. We don't really get any clues to what that's going to be or what the exact deal is. I'm not super fond of the idea, but I kind of see where they're going with setting up Hawk and Duke having a conflict going forward. But I think at this point, it's just having there be two secret G.I. Joe teams it's a little much. I think that's a few too many factions we're working with now, especially this early on where we don't even have Cobra yet. Because right now we've got the Transformers, both Autobots and Decepticons, who are working against each other, but are more or less in the same camp compared to G.I. Joe, who hates all robots. Then we've got the Cobra Law guys, who are obviously against the Transformers, and are against Cobra Commander. We got whatever the fuck Cobra Commander's up to, and we know he's going to go meet Destro in the next issue of his series. So presumably he's teaming up with him, which is going to set up Cobra. But now we've got two different fucking G.I. Joe teams who are presumably going to be antagonistic towards each other. So I don't know. That's like what? Like fucking 6 different factions already? And that's not even including the ones like the smaller ones, like what's left of the Dreadnoks, who are presumably going to join Cobra whenever Cobra starts to fucking exist. And we've got, that's right, we've also got all the shit going on with Void Rivals, where we've got the fucking Quintessons, we've got the Zertonians, the Agorians, and everybody else going on there. We've got whoever the fuck this guy was at the end of the Free Comic Book Day story here. Maybe he's a part of them, maybe he's not, I don't know. We don't fucking see anything that kind of clues us in what this guy's deal is. So for all we know, that's a completely different faction as well. My point is, it's getting a little bloated already with the various factions going on this early on. And we haven't even gotten to fucking Cobra yet in our G.I. Joe story. So I fucking really don't know what the heck they're thinking of this. I don't know how long the whole secret team thing is going to last, and presumably not very long. The second, anybody learns about it, it's probably going to fall apart. But just in concept, it doesn't really bode well for me, unfortunately. But who knows? Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. I have a feeling they're going to keep the G.I. Joe and Transformers and everything else kind of on their own for quite a little bit longer. I know Void Rivals is starting to very heavily lean into the Transformers stuff, mostly because I think it's for sales purposes. But from here, I think just Transformers and G.I. Joe are going to stay on their own. So I think that'll work fine, but they're clearly dipping their toes into setting up the greater thing with the Cobra Law stuff here. So I don't know. It is starting to get a little hectic. I imagine the stuff with Cobra Law is going to set up an interesting thing where I imagine that's going to come into play with Cobra Commander later, where him and Megatron are probably going to team up over a mutual seething over Globulus, but I imagine Megatron's not going to be super happy once he figures out who Cobra Commander is, which is going to be an interesting angle. I kind of hope they do that, actually. I really like that idea. That seems really fun. But beyond that, it does seem like it's getting a little clustered. I don't really know how well it bodes, but it wasn't a terrible story in a vacuum. It was fine. This really didn't feel like it needed to be a whole story. Like, I appreciate that they at least resolved this plot line. And I think, you know what? Actually, no. I'll change my mind. No, this is a perfect use for a Free Comic Book Day thing, is to resolve this little plot line here that really isn't important enough to resolve in another book. Admittedly, I think having Baroness become part of G.I. Joe is something that should probably have been resolved in the main title rather than a spin-off thing, even if it was like an annual type of thing, like a larger collection of specifically G.I. Joe stuff. But nonetheless, this was the good format to resolve that plot line. But I don't know, there's a lot of worrying things that are happening going forward. Overall, nice little solid blend of quality here. We get some good stuff, we get some bad stuff. Overall, like I said, it's a fucking free comic. I'm not going to complain too much. It's fine. I don't have any complaints. I got exactly what I paid for, which was jack shit. But that's really all I can say is, it was free, dude. What the fuck am I going to do? Ask for a refund? Exactly. Overall, good stuff. Transformer stuff is really good. G.I. Joe and everything else is not quite as good. Doesn't seem like it has as strong a solid vision quite yet. But I'm still looking forward to where things are going. I think I have gone on quite far too long, so I'm going to wrap it up here. I will check back in whenever the hell for whatever the hell is next. And as always, thank you very much for watching.